Hey everyone! So I'm back here in the month of January. These are pictures and video clips from basically throughout the month so you can see how much growth is happening, and it's pretty exciting because I'll be gone for a couple days and then I'll return and everything will have just exploded in growth. So, it's exciting when spring is getting close here in Zone 10A and everything's growing. So here we have my Lacinto or Dinosaur Kale. We also have the Kohlrabi. Both are doing really well. Unfortunately, I put them in the front of the bed, so they're stealing all the sun. But the Kohlrabi is forming, which is exciting. I don't know how long I want to wait before I harvest it, but we'll see. And then the Tatsoi greens are doing really well. I've harvested from here several times already, and they taste really good raw or sauteed. Everything else in the garden is just growing along. Even the red Russian kale, which I was having trouble just growing in general, seems to be thriving a bit more, so that's good. And the kale's pretty much ready, the dinosaur kale's pretty much ready to harvest. So the way I harvest my kale is I basically wait until it has more than 5 leaves. I usually try to leave 4 or 5 leaves after harvesting, so that's an important factor. And basically the kale grows along the side. I grab a leaf and I just pull it off. Some people use scissors, but I like just pulling it. And then here are the Tatsoi greens. I used to use scissors, but now I do sort of the same method as the kale. I grab a leaf, try to get it as close to the main stem as possible, and just pull it off. I find that as long as you get super close to the stem, it makes for a very clean harvest. And that way you don't have as many loose decaying green material left over from the stem, which can attract slugs and other animals. So it's pretty easy for me to fill up this bowl every time. And then here is the watermelon radish. So I've been growing this for a while. Initially it didn't bulb, but now it's finally turned into sort of like a, in between a golf ball and a baseball size. So the way I'm harvesting is I'm just sticking the shovel in and trying to loosen the dirt around the edges. And once it feels loose, you just give it a pull and it should come out pretty easily. A lot of my radish started growing upwards out of the dirt, so you can see the radish coming and you can tell when it's ready, basically. This radish is a nice size. You just have to brush off some dirt. I have a lot of roots coming out of the bottom, which I learned is due to the fact that my soil is not sandy and loose. But honestly, it didn't really affect the radish itself, and I was so excited because it had a perfect pink center. I basically tried to use every part of the radish, so I cut the greens, I cut the stems, I did thin chunks, I did thick chunks, some were cooked, some were eaten raw. Ultimately, I didn't like the stems. So here's another radish where I'm seeing it starting to flower. Usually that means that the radish itself is going to start getting woody if you don't harvest it. So you have 2 options, either harvest or leave and let it go to seed and save the seeds for later. I have plenty of radish seeds right now, so I decided just to harvest it then and there. I use the same method, and then I also wanted to add, I take the leaves and I throw them straight in the compost pile because, as I said earlier, I tried them. They didn't taste good, they're sort of spiny, and I would much rather just eat the radish and compost the rest of it. So this is the other radish I harvested. And then now moving on to seed starting. So these are the seeds I have started. They're mostly brassicas and a couple other random greens. They all sprouted up super quickly in the cocoa core, and I'm going to prick them out and put them into a tray. These are the same seedlings pricked out and put on a self-watering tray. Check my other video for a review of that said tray. And this is after 4 weeks of growth. So everything grew very well. It's very vibrant and there are many true leaves on there. I also have been growing lettuce pretty much every other week or so, just starting a couple seeds. They're super easy to prick out, and then Once they do get started, I prick them out and put them into individual cells. I wait a week or so and then they get transplanted into the garden. I also tried starting some eggplant. That has not been as successful. This is on a heating mat, but I don't know if it's warm enough or not. On the other hand, I also started some asparagus seedlings, and the heat mat really did wonders for these asparagus seedlings. Eventually, I did have about 100% germination, which is a bunch of asparagus seedlings. But knowing how things work, some of them are gonna die, so it's always good to start with more than you need and then figure it out later. So these are the asparagus seedlings. After a few weeks, they're all super tall and ferny. Here's some carrot seedlings seeds that I initially soaked and then planted. Throughout the month, they just kept growing and growing. And then finally, by the end of the month, you're seeing several leaves forming and they look pretty good. They're a little floppy, but hopefully roots start to form. Or at least I hope so. I also direct sowed some more watermelon radish just to keep that going. And then finally, these are sort of volunteer mint plants that just appeared. It's actually red shiso, or I think a variety of mint. And then finally, these aren't really seedlings, these are vegetable scraps, but those are growing too. These are some small kale that we have going on. And then this is actually one of the first radishes I planted, but this was in the shade. So it's finally starting to grow. So to close off this video, this is an example of one of the harvests from my garden. It's not the biggest garden in the world and we're not growing a bazillion plants, but it's nice to just grab a bowl of vegetables and bring it inside to cook and enjoy for dinner. I'm really excited for spring and the subsequent months just because there will definitely be more plants going in.